clean up in aisle 5. You're gonna need tear gas, pepper spray, and assault gear just to listen to this show.
Sasquatch, the moon landing, UFOs, 9/11, flat earth, JFK. All of these things have one thing in common: unanswered questions. So let's get to the bottom of that.
Now here's something completely random.
Animals in action, animals in action.
Random.
We using that in the intro?
Thank you and good night.
Dice Man Enterprises exclusively presents a talk show that will get to the bottom of things once and for all. And now here's your host for Let's Get to the Bottom of That, a bunch of weirdos on a mic.
Here we go. One for the money, two for the show. Everybody get up and let's go.
Did you write that?
I did, just then in my head. Welcome into another edition of Let's Get to the Bottom of That. I'm your host, Byron Dice. I'm joined in studio by Curtis, Jason, and Joey. It's a good dance.
It's hot.
It's a good dance.
It's real hot.
It is real hot.
What the heck was
It was real
It's
hot.
allergies, bro. This time of year.
Did you say you had some caffeine pills?
I did.
I
do. It's gone now.
Oh, okay.
Joey took them.
I need to hook one of those up.
Yeah, I crushed.
Do
a
you really
couple
want
of
one?
them.
Maybe later. I don't know.
Crushed
We're
it
getting
up
through
and
it.
Snorted
Pop
it.
'em on Not on the
pop
air.
them on the air, bro.
We'll go. Just
We just get a big
Your
old.
hair stands up.
today we're
Welcome to
talking
the
about.
podcast.
I forgot what I'm naming this show today. Morale in the WWII.
Yeah. Around.
That's what I was going to call it. I forgot what I was going to call it, but of course, people that are clicking on this episode know exactly what I called it, even though I don't know what I'm calling it right now.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
And what does WW2 stand for?
World War II.
Okay.
And we're going to be talking about Jeep shows today. And if you don't know what that means, stay tuned. You're going to find out. Hey, this week's question of the week, you can scroll if you're listening on the Spotify app on your mobile device and scroll and vote on this poll. In 2015, which national retail chain allegedly closed a number of stores to repurpose it as prison camps?
Lululemon.
Good one. It's probably true. A, Costco. B, Sears. C, Target. Or D, Walmart.
I think it's
Walmart.
Target.
No, it's Walmart.
Okay, you got Walmart.
Yeah, it's Walmart.
I'm going with Lululemon
Lululemon.
on that one.
100%.
Or Target. What do you think, Joey?
McDonald's.
Oh, good one.
What year?
It is a prison camp. 2015.
I'm going Sears, actually.
What?
Sears, nice. I didn't think Sears was a thing anymore.
They shut down their stores to make them prisons in
Prison
America.
camps.
In
That's
the
what
United
the theory
States.
was.
Yeah,
It's a theory.
allegedly.
Allegedly.
That's the key question. Allegedly, they were going to repurpose as prison camps.
They first were
I
going to
do
repurpose
remember
it.
footage of that.
Well, they
by
would,
the way.
and then they said they were repurposing the buildings for training for the local police and also for the military
Oh, sure.
for tactical training.
Well, that wouldn't be Target.
No, there's
No, I don't think so.
I could see them imprisoning people though.
Target,
Yeah,
they imprison them now when you go in the store.
they do.
Yeah. You can barely get out with your life.
You can barely get out with your life. They have
Only got out with my
rainbows
life twice.
everywhere.
Yeah. I think they've tampered that down, though.
They did, because there's a lot of people upset.
Well, it's backlash.
Yeah, it's good.
By the way, Curtis he has a new hat on today.
New hat.
Which, by the way, if you've listened to the show, Lil Guapo, you know this is our shtick. It's his shtick.
We actually I had somebody send me a hat, and you'll see that on one of our episodes.
Yeah, we actually had somebody send us a hat, so that's great. Where can they send it?
P.O. Box 68, Peculiar, Missouri 64078. But there's something interesting about this hat.
Okay.
This was sent to me, but I ordered it, and it's so I was watching this particular movie.
Okay.
And I could not find. I wanted the hat the guy was wearing, and I couldn't find one anywhere on the internet to buy it. Okay, there was all these people that had made replicas, and so what I did was I made a replica. So if
Okay.
anybody can look at my hat.
Yeah.
And it says Giver, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, I thought it was
G-I-V
really cool in the
apostrophe
movie.
R-E-R.
That was really cool in that movie.
Is that really how you
everything
spell it?
was, yeah.
There's apostrophe in there?
Yeah.
Giver.
You see the
Yeah.
apostrophe up
Well, I
here.
was just saying, I didn't know if that was made up, like a made up word.
Well,
Yeah.
giver.
Aren't all words made up?
I think so.
Let me know
What if we're all wrong?
in the show notes or get on our Discord and tell me where you think the movie's from.
Yeah.
Or what movie this hat
I'm
is
totally don't know.
It was a black and white movie,
from. It was not.
and then
Oh, I got it.
all
That's
of a sudden he started to see color.
You're talking about Pleasantville.
They were killing babies, and they didn't even know it was bad.
Pleasantville.
No.
That's the movie you're talking about.
They were killing babies, dude. They were shooting them with a shot, but everyone was so numb to it. So then this guy was the dream giver, right?
Okay.
He went on the outskirts of
tracking.
town, and they was given the dreams, and that's when he learned.
Oh, you're
about
talking
war.
about The Giver.
Yeah,
That's a
The
real
book,
movie?
The Giver.
That's
No,
it,
that's the
right?
book, The Giver. No, that's not it.
That's not it.
The guy in the movie
I'm going to go Pulp Fiction.
wears a hat just like this.
I'm going Pulp Fiction.
Sort of.
yeah. So yeah,
That's
the
my
movie,
guess.
The Giver. That's it.
So your guess is The Giver. What's yours, Jason?
What are we talking about?
My hat, dude.
Jason always checks out.
Yeah, I
Fine.
think it's Zorro.
Zorro?
Oh,
That's close.
dude.
Desperado?
They didn't wear caps like that in Zorro. They wore top hats.
I don't know. Were you there?
Yes. I was there with the Three
The
Musketeers.
Dons.
Tom Hanks was there, I think.
Hey, today we have a guest on the show. We're going to be interviewing a guest of a book called Jeep Shows. His name's Robert O'Connor.
Looks like this. The book looks
there's
like
Jeep
this.
Show.
Nobody can see it.
Curtis actually got the book, and he is about halfway through, 3/4 through.
I'm about 50,
Something
75
like that.
pages before I'm done.
So Curtis read the book. I have some questions for the author. They reached out to me and wanted to be on the show
Yeah.
to talk to our listeners. And the reason it intrigued me because we just talked about the Battle of the Bulge on the Manhattan Project.
Manhattan Project.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were talking about Easy Company, how they were about to get shipped off to the Pacific before they dropped the bombs and the war was over.
Right. And then Joey said, yeah, there's always a Battle of the Bulge with
did.
men.
Yeah,
Every
that's what
day.
it's about.
And then that was the
And then
was the
our
bit.
listeners tore us apart because we got the dates wrong.
Correct.
But that's not
we
gonna
weren't
happen.
Which we
talking about
normally
dates. We weren't talking about dates though.
I'm just saying. I just thought it was funny. I mean, just World War II. He actually mentioned it.
Yeah.
Like World War II nuts are so.
Oh, they'll
up in
get on
arm.
you.
dude. They're up. They're
They'll
up
get on
on you. They're like, it was October 7th of 1942. You idiot.
Yeah. How could you get it wrong?
I'm like, I said October. It was the 7th. I'm
Yeah.
like,
Well,
All
anyway,
right,
we're
dog.
gonna
a hard
interview
market.
Robert
It is.
O'Connor. We're gonna actually join the interview, already in progress. So we'll just intro him real quick. Robert O'Connor is the author of an extraordinary new World War II novel called Jeep Show, a trooper at the Battle of the Bulge. He has he has a previous book. It was nonfiction called Gumption Aid. It was a booster for your self-improvement plan. Both books are two radically different books, but they're both about morale. So we will join Robert right now in the interview. Hope you enjoy it. Well, let's start the show by basically tell us about this novel that you wrote, when you wrote it, and how you got inspired to write it.
Sure. Jeep Show, a trooper at the Battle of the Bulge, and trooper is spelled Trouper, as in show business trooper.
Okay.
So the book was inspired by a real person who I learned about when I was at Procter and Gamble. He was a circus promoter and was involved in a Procter and Gamble legend called the Oxydol Circus. As I was researching the Oxydol Circus for another nonfiction book, I happened to call this man's daughter, and she said, "Oh yes, he was a circus promoter after the war, but did you know that during the war he was an enlisted entertainer?" And I said, "No, I did not know that, and I did not know that there were any enlisted entertainers." So she told me about that. I did my own research, and she also said that her dad wrote home frequently from the European theater of operations in World War II, and that her aunt, his older sister, had saved every letter, and that they had published them in a book. So I was able to obtain this primary source material, this man describing what his life was like in Europe, working with Mickey Rooney, the famous Hollywood star, who was also an enlisted entertainer, and doing Jeep shows in particular. A Jeep show would be 3 enlisted entertainers, military occupation specialty 442. They would get in a Jeep with a driver, and they would go to just behind the front lines where combat troops would be brought back for a hot meal and perhaps a uniform exchange. And they would put on essentially a small variety show, some jokes, some singing, some impressions, some dancing. They would almost always pull a soldier out of the audience who, his buddies said he had some talent. That was part of the show. And basically, do that entertaining in areas where the USO and the Red Cross could not go.
Oh.
And to me, these were two, this was within artillery and sniper range of the German lines. They weren't, although it in the book we get to Bastogne and there is fighting by the entertainment soldier, but in general their job was to entertain, not to shoot at the Germans. So the Army had many programs to try to encourage morale among soldiers. There's a famous quote from Napoleon, morale is to the material as 3 is to 1. And we all kind of know that in our lives. We can do so many things when our morale is high, despite obstacles, that I can fix things around my house, even though my toolkit is a Phillips head screwdriver and a hammer, if I've got the morale. And so the Army did many things. And of course, the USO did brilliant work in the rear echelons, as did the Red Cross, but very little got to frontline soldiers other than ammunition and gasoline. So these Jeep shows were much appreciated. And what I came to understand, and this is really true, in the broader picture, is when you are trying to be of comfort, boost morale of people that are having a hard time, whether it's having a hard time because they're in danger of being wounded or killed, or having a hard time because, somebody died or they lost their job or whatever. It's the being present that really counts. So the show was important and funny and entertaining, but it was the fact that these entertainers, and especially a famous one like Mickey Rooney, took the time and the trouble to be physically present with these guys. And, they do their show, and then afterwards there's coffee and cigarettes, and Mickey Rooney might sign a couple of autographs. None of the other entertainers
Bring
were
on the
famous enough
girls.
to be.
Yeah.
Well, yes, that part of his routine was, we don't have girls like the USO, so we'll try to make up for it. But interestingly, some other enlisted entertainers that were not famous at the time but went on to be quite successful include Mel Brooks of Young Frankenstein fame, and many others. Sammy Davis Jr., which may be before your time, gentlemen, but Sammy Davis Jr. was a black man and a very successful Las Vegas entertainer.
The Rat Pack.
Had a few hits on. Yeah, he was in the Rat Pack. He may well have been. The Army was segregated in World War II still. Sammy Davis Jr. may well have been, and I cannot back this up with facts yet, but he may well have been the first black soldier to integrate the United States Army because he was in Jeep shows. So he was traveling with 2 other entertainers. Yeah. So we need to look into that one. We need to look into that.
We got to get to the
bottom of that.
Yeah, that exactly. Red Buttons was very popular. Red Skelton.
Red Skelton, yes.
Yeah, very popular comedian in the 50s and 60s, had his own show. Burt Lancaster, successful author, Dick Van Dyke. So interestingly, there were many men who were just kids practically when they were in the Morale Corps and going around doing this work in World War II that went on to great success. There were many others like my protagonist who, did not make it in show business and did other things. But so that was the Morale Corps effort for frontline combat troops Jeep shows.
Okay.
Awesome.
So you said the protagonist in the book is based on this. It was Jim Hetzker. Is that right?
Jim Hetzer. Yes.
Yeah.
Hetzer.
Okay. So he was actually in a Jeep show. That's what when I was researching
Yes.
this, I was reading this. I was like, okay. And then I read the Oxydol Circus account, and then I was like,
Yes.
it doesn't sound like, how is this guy inspiring the story of the Jeep shows? And one of the things I noticed is the book. I really like it, by the way. And I'm almost done with
thanks.
it. I'm about like 50 to 75 pages from being done. I got it last week, and I've just been gobbling it down. So it's yeah. But it kind of reads like a tour of the Battle of the Bulge. Is that kind of your process in writing, just like looking at the major motions, or were you actually following where he was going in that?
That's a very cool question. First of all, it's a novel. So even though it's based on this real life person, Jim Hetzer, who was doing Jeep shows with Mickey Rooney in the European Theater of Operations, Jim Hetzer was not caught up in the Battle of the Bulge the way his character, Jim Tanzer, is in the book. I was interested in the Battle of the Bulge because I knew Hetzer was already over in Europe at that time. And then the Battle of the Bulge, as you probably know, is the largest battle ever fought by the United States Army and was fairly pivotal. It was kind of Hitler's last throw of the dice. And it was, in retrospect, a pretty desperate throw of the dice. But so I was very interested in that, wanted to get him caught up with that. But yes, you picked up on something that is important. Each chapter, after he gets, the Germans attack on the morning of December 16th and surprise the heck out of Jim Tanzer and everybody else at the front lines, he retreats just ahead of the Germans under orders. He retreats and he stops at points where there were major battles in the middle of the front. The Battle of the Bulge was fought over something like, I think, a 90-mile front. I mean, it was a huge battle, and there was battles in the north and battles in the south, but the Germans made the most progress right in the middle. And so I followed these battles or stands that were taken by the American troops. And so he's caught in a frontline village called Hosingen, which was a strong point, and they had a company, 28th Division company there. He retreats to Clairvaux, which is a small city in Luxembourg. And again, the next day there was a battle there, and the Germans overtook it. And then he retreats to a place called Antonio Shaft, which is literally just a crossroads where the road heading west from Clairvaux meets the road to Bastogne. And there was a desperate holding action there by a mixed group of U.S. troops called Team Rose, I think it was, after their commander. Task Force Rose. Task Force Rose, after their commander, Colonel Rose. So he's there at that, and then he retreats to Longvilly, which is another place where they made a stand and were then overwhelmed. The whole time, the U.S. Army High Command was essentially trying to buy time. The Germans, if this long shot attack would have worked, they would have had to make incredible progress. Everything would have had to go right. And even though they dramatically outnumbered the Americans that were present the first few days, the Americans were able to kind of throw enough of a wrench in the works by making pretty heroic stands at different places that they slowed the Germans down long enough for the famous 101st to get into Bastogne. They were coming up from the south of France, and so Jim is present at kind of each of these holding actions in the middle. He keeps getting ordered to retreat. They keep giving him letters that the officers want sent home.
Go
to
run
their
this map
wives,
back. Go run this map back. Yeah,
exactly, because they think they're going to be killed or taken prisoner, so they want to send a letter. So he keeps getting letters and ordered to move back, and he's half a mile ahead of the Germans. And then he ends up in Bastogne, and he's there for about 5 or 6 days. Things happen there, and he actually has to turn and fight. In actual fact, there was a unit, the 101st, of course, made a heroic defense of Bastogne, but they were helped by a unit called Team Snafu, situation normal, all effed up.
All effed up.
Wow.
Snafu, yeah, an army slang from
Yeah.
World War II.
Yeah.
And Team Snafu was made up of, surviving infantrymen of companies that had been overrun. It was made up of barbers and bakers and telephone operators and mechanics who, had not been in combat, were echelon soldiers, and then this one entertainment soldier. And Team Snafu was organized and sent in to fill the gaps between the 4 regiments of the 101st Airborne, which made kind of a square around Bastogne. So they had combat, and then they had other duties like graves registration, picking up the dead Americans and moving them into burial and other operations. So he's in Bastogne for 5 days, and we get a feel for what it's like to be a ground level grunt soldier in Bastogne. So that's, yes, I picked historically accurate fights, and then of course everyone knows about the defense of Bastogne, because I wanted World War II nerds, and I have become one, I'm afraid, but with this book, yeah. But I wanted World War II nerds. They're very picky, and if you're writing fiction and you do something that makes no sense, like a Navy ship transported from Philadelphia to Newport News, or whatever you guys were chewing over last week. If you stick that in your historical novel about World War II, the World War II buffs will give you a big thumbs down. They know better.
Yeah. Oh, they do.
So I was following these actual factual things, and I read a lot of letters from other soldiers as well, and diaries. So I tried to pick up on, what it was like. An example is as the protagonist, Jim Tanzer, gets closer to Clairvaux, and it's clear there's bad things going on, he gets stopped by a sentry on the outskirts of Bastogne, and challenged, and has to answer all sorts of questions about the Philadelphia Phillies and, movies in America, because they became paranoid that some Germans in American uniforms had indeed gotten behind American lines and switched a few road signs. Their actual strategic effect was very little, except that they freaked everybody out. So everybody was super tense.
Yeah.
And so, I had Jim get challenged with about 15 questions with a gun pointed at him, while this sentry, determines that, yes, he is.
I like how the guy behind him was like, hey, he's an American, just let him through.
Right,
and he's like, no, I'm going to ask him one more question. Yeah. I remember that part in the book.
Yeah. I really enjoyed looking up trivia about the Philadelphia Phillies in 1942, cool. so I could put that question in his mouth.
Something that I noticed in the book was you highlight the humanity of somebody who was like, hey, I'm an entertainment specialist, and you can see, like, when he was about to have to go through combat, he was scared, and you could almost feel his fear, and he was like, but wait, I need to get this map back. They told me to get this map back. And then, like, people are handing him letters, and he's and then he's like being very quiet that he's a bazooka specialist as well. Like, and he's like they're like, anybody trained on bazooka? And he's like, just quiet. And I was like, man,
looking at his feet, looking down at his boots.
You always hear the stories written about the heroes that were like, yeah, I'm it, and then they take out 10 tanks or something like that. But this guy was like really human. And then one of the other things I thought was interesting, you don't hear a lot about, is the bombing of London. When they were and you had a scene in your book where before he goes over there, all of a sudden he's in the street. I forget where it was, and it was like some park. And the bomb comes down and just destroys the pub that he had been in, and she was trying to dig her dad out and stuff like that. So, like, when I read books about World War II, like I just read Stephen Ambrose's The Band of Brothers, and I'm
Yeah,
I'm about
yeah.
to read the Pacific and stuff like that. But the those are just like highlighting like Easy Company of the 101st,
Right,
and then
right,
so you get these
right.
little snapshots. But what I love about your book is that, like you said, you're highlighting all these major battles, and I was like, wow, this is way bigger than I thought it was. I thought it was Easy Company holding them at Bastogne,
Right,
but
right,
but
right.
there's just so much you don't know, and all the intrigue of like, okay, well, there's these mixed units like the Rose Task Force and stuff like that.
Yeah,
that
yeah.
were real things. So how did you go about learning all this stuff about the battle? I mean, did you read a book? Did you,
Yeah.
Are you
Um,
internet searching?
Yeah, I read a book. Well, the first thing I want to say is, if I'm kind of a history nerd. I was a history major undergraduate, and I'm kind of curious about
Okay.
anything in the past and what the details were. Like, what did people wear? What did they eat? What?
Yeah.
And the other thing I'll say is, for me, research is fun and writing is hard.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
did a lot of research. I read several excellent nonfiction books about the Battle of the Bulge, and then a couple of excellent nonfiction books about the Army in World War II. I also had these letters as a primary source. I also found on the endless internet the Morale Corps, and remember the protagonist is a enlisted man in the Morale Corps. I found the 1944 Manual of Operations of the Morale Corps. And it is absolutely amazing, to read their instructions.
Yeah, you
to
tag
these
those in the beginning
soldiers.
of each chapter, right? You tag
Yes,
a bunch of
I
things.
pulled. Yeah, I tagged some of those in. I think is that called epigraphs. I can never get that word right, but yes,
Okay,
yeah, I tagged a couple because they're just so amazing.
Yeah.
That was actually printed. I didn't make that up.
Yeah.
I did watch. I did watch a few movies. You probably know about the Ken Burns documentary, World War II documentary called The War. It does a brilliant job of showing the home front and also showing what life was like they pick out, I don't know, 5 or 6, maybe more, individual soldiers for repeated interviews and questions. And so I found that very, very valuable. Of course, I watched Band of Brothers, and that's an excellent miniseries.
Yeah.
I watched YouTube documentaries. I did watch. There's a famous movie from 1954 with Bing Crosby called White Christmas, and they actually start the movie's about an inn in Vermont, but they start the movie with Bing Crosby doing what is pretty much a Jeep show for troops at the front lines. Now it's all Hollywood, it's all pimped up, with Hollywood touches, but the concept of here's soldiers doing a show for other soldiers is correct. I was amazed when I stumbled upon it. I studied a lot of lists of slang from the time, and specifically Army slang. You have to be somewhat judicious. You can't put in, every other sentence of words people don't know.
Yeah.
But you want to kind of add. It's a little bit like adding Tabasco sauce to something. You want to add enough to get some spice in there, but you don't want to just burn people out. So I became familiar with a lot of slang at the time. By the way, the word that comes up over and over again that we don't use anymore is swell.
Yeah.
That's swell.
SWELL. Swell. Yeah. You might hear it once a year, but they said it all the time. Anything that was good back then was that's swell, or he's a swell guy, or that's a swell hamburger, so I definitely use that. I read a couple of noir detective novels from the time, The Big Sleep and a couple of others, to get heavy duty slang. Mickey Rooney wrote 2 autobiographies. I read those. There was a famous set of cartoons called Willie and Joe, published during the war in Stars and Stripes, which was the newspaper for soldiers, and they depicted in very funny yet very realistic ways the life of the infantry soldier. General Patton hated these cartoons, And but because we have freedom of the press, and we had citizen soldiers in the army, they continue to run. And those cartoons really helped me get a feel for the discomfort of being in the front lines, and the bullshit hierarchy, what they called in the army then, they called chicken shit. The colonel wants you to paint the stones in front of his barracks white again this weekend. So Willie and Joe rebelled against that. And I did other, read about the Civilian Conservation Corps. Oh, I read a lot about the Queen Mary, what had been a luxury liner, the fastest ship in the world. And the reason I did is, as I put a chapter where the protagonist and Mickey Rooney are on the Queen Mary headed over to the war.
Yeah.
My father, at 19 years old, was on the Queen Mary troop ship headed over for the war. So it really made me feel closer to him to really get in and understand what the hell that was like. Because when the Queen Mary was a luxury liner, it took something like 2,600 passengers. They put 16,000 soldiers on the Queen Mary as a troop ship. So it was unbelievably crowded and somewhat uncomfortable.
I was just thinking about all the plumbing and the sanitation issues that you would have on that ship too, not to mention the crowding.
They might have just opened the port and dumped it in the ocean.
Yeah, that's true.
Or just hung off the side.
But yeah,
right. They did, as you know from reading, they did only have saltwater showers.
Yeah.
When they got a shower, which wasn't often, and it was salt water, which presented its own entertaining possibilities in the book. And then the last thing, there's a short bit about this over-the-top party by a bunch of Yale alumni in New Haven, and the protagonist, this is before the war, and the protagonist does not realize it, but he's assigned to produce a show for this party that ends up involving prostitutes, not to his knowledge, but he figures it out. That came from my dad, who grew up blue collar Irish Catholic in Waterbury, Connecticut. Actually went to Yale on the GI Bill, if you can believe it. Wow. Yeah, he was a little out of his element, but he graduated. I'll give him credit. And he told me that story. He said, "Oh my God, we had alumni weekend, and these old guys, class of 1908, he said they were busing the prostitutes in from New York City." And I remembered that story and just got my protagonist unwittingly involved with that kind of an event.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
One of my favorite parts.
Yeah. That's interesting. I didn't realize that. I guess I didn't catch that was what was going on. I did see
well,
that
you're clearly too innocent.
Yeah, I'm too innocent. There you go. So, I was going to ask about the Oxydol Circus. Are there any parallels in the book, or was it just the fact that Jim Hetzer was also a 442 MOS?
Was also a producer after the war.
Yeah, producer.
There are no parallels. The Oxydol Circus, and I love talking about it. When I first got to Procter & Gamble, I was in marketing, and they sent me to what was called remedial memo writing school, because I guess they didn't like the way I was writing my memo.
Wow.
It was taught by a guy named Gib Carey, and he was a kind of a well-respected lifetime employee of Procter & Gamble, was never going to be CEO, but well-respected. And so they gave him various duties, one of which was to teach brand assistants how to write memos. We spent very little time on that. We spent most of the time listening to Gibb spin these fabulous yarns about different things that happened at P&G. Okay. And his favorite was the Oxydol Circus. Okay. And in 1968, and Oxydol, by the way, for you younger men, it was a very famous brand of detergent, like Tide would be now. And it was one of the P&G brands. So in 1968, the Oxydol brand manager, the same Gib Carey I'm speaking about, was reached by a circus promoter, Jim Hetzer. Somehow Jim Hetzer convinced Gib Carey that it would be a very good idea if Oxydol sponsored his traveling circus. They could tie in with supermarkets in cities. They could give free tickets for Oxidol box tops, all sorts of great things. He agreed to it, and the circus almost immediately turned into a disaster, humorous only in retrospect. Among the things that went wrong, and many things went wrong, was the fact that they did not inform the Shriners, who are very proud of their own traveling circus. They did not inform the Shriners that that a competing circus would be coming to town, and thus the Oxidol Circus could not get their railroad cars unloaded. Their advertisements ran upside down in the newspapers, and many other problems. They were also supposed to have Jim Hetzer promised a 12-foot ice skating bear.
Yeah, the bear.
It turned out to be a normal bear that didn't skate. All sorts of things.
He
the
said
lions
he couldn't skate, but he could rollerblade or something like that, or roller skate.
Right.
Yeah,
this was before rollerblading.
Yeah,
this was 1960.
And then they hired a midget, a short person, to stand next to the bear to make him look 10 feet tall. Yeah,
yeah,
I read that too.
That's right. How did you know that?
I read it.
So Gib Carey gets called up to the 12th floor at P&G Valhalla, where the CEO is, and Gib Carey, of course, thinks he's going to be fired, and you never get, unless you're very highly up, you never go up to the 12th floor in Cincinnati. And it's a gentleman named Ed Harness at the time in 1968, and Gib walks into, is ushered into Harness's office, and Harness is looking out his huge windows over the Ohio River, and he doesn't even turn around, and he just says, "Mr. Carey, make it go away."
Make it go away.
And Gib says, "Yes, sir, I will." And he turns around and, makes it go away, but survives, manages to survive in his P&G career, which is astonishing. So that's the Oxidol Circus, and it is absolute legend at Procter & Gamble. And that's what I was researching that for another nonfiction book when I stumbled upon Jim Hetzer, the producer of the Oxidol Circus, who, had been an enlisted entertainer in World War II and found 150 of his letters home.
Yeah. I was reading about the Oxidol Circus, and it seemed like every time Jim would call Gib, it was just another thing, like, "Hey, we got another problem," but and he had a workaround for it. It was pretty funny.
Yeah.
But
yes.
Yeah, that's cool.
It's a good story.
Does the Oxidol have any relation to the OxyClean with Billy Mays?
Oh.
No.
Okay.
I think not that I know. I don't think OxyClean is a Procter & Gamble product.
Gotcha. I was just Billy Mays.
They may have
making a
more.
connection.
Rest in peace.
R.I.P.
Yes, exactly. It's gone, along with a few others.
So, I guess, like, in terms of, like, all these different books, like the Ambroses have written a couple books about. Those are the ones I've been reading lately, aside from yours. But the where does your book stand in, I guess, the library of World War II literature? Like,
well, interesting. It's received amazing reviews so far. I've been, pleasantly surprised, because by the time you finish writing a book, you're really sick of it. And then somebody reads it and likes it. You're like, "Oh, I remember what I set out to do. That's right."
Yeah, that's how we feel about our podcast most of the time.
Yes. Right. Yeah, that sucked. And then somebody says, "Man, that was hilarious." Yeah.
Catches us guard every
So
time.
it's, it's kind of like Catch-22 was a novel written by a World War II veteran in the late 60s. And it is a work of genius. And it's basically about the absurdity and tragedy of war. And it stands the test of time. Jeep Show is very similar to that. I'm not sure it's a work of genius, but certainly very similar in that there's funny parts of Jeep Show, but it also shows the the harsh life and the tragedy of being in battle, and does not in the least glorify war. And that's really important to me, because war is awful. And it's awful for everybody, except the people that don't have to fight it, and civilians that don't have to suffer. But so I put it in that tradition, there was a famous book, I'm sure you've heard of it, written about the Civil War, called The Red Badge of Courage.
Oh yeah.
And I read that, and what I got from that was, in The Red Badge of Courage, the young Union soldier, when he first faces battle, he basically runs away.
Yeah.
Just coward. He gets overwhelmed. He runs away. But then he finds his way, with some help, some sort of accidentally, he finds his way back to his unit after running well to the rear, and then fights like a crazy man for the next couple of days, very bravely. And and it got me thinking that Jim Tanzer, the protagonist, would be anxious to avoid battle, to avoid combat if he could. So he's like, as you said, he's like, hey, I've been given this captured German map. I need to get out of here because this needs to be taken to Bastogne.
Yeah.
And along the way, he meets with various degrees of skepticism about that. Well, stay here and fight for a little bit, and then you can go, or, that kind of thing. But then when he does have to turn and fight in Bastogne, as a normal person would be, he's quite frightened, but he does his duty.
Yeah.
He does his duty, as most people will. So I was kind of inspired by, that famous book, The Red Badge of Courage. So, I put it somewhere like that. One of my Amazon reviewers, though, said, made a great line. He says, all he wrote was Forrest Gump meets Band of Brothers.
Yeah, I could see that.
I love that line.
I could see that. Yeah. Well,
that's where I'd put it.
That's interesting. You mentioned the Red Badge of Courage. I read that when I was very young. I didn't really understand what war was and stuff like that. But I love Jim Tanzer in the book because you always wonder when you're put up against those kinds of things in your life and like the chaos that's going on. Like we can look back and say, okay, well this general was trying to do this, and that we can see the overlay and see what's going on. But then you've got this soldier hunkered down in a foxhole, knows the Germans are coming down the road. He's told to do a very small portion of what is going to help win the war, and then I think then we all idolize the heroes and the guys who stayed for 6 months in the winter with no shoes or socks and that kind of stuff.
Right.
But to have some guy who was like, dude, I'm an entertainment specialist. I'm supposed to be entertaining these guys, and then he's like, hey, lob a grenade and stay in this foxhole for a while, and and then just barely makes it out by the skin of his teeth every time. But I guess, with those guys, even in the Red Badge of Courage, when you've done the cowardly thing or whatever, you run away, and then you're like, well, wait a minute, I've already seen the worst it could get. You can turn and kind of buck up and do your job, I think, at that point. So, yeah.
Well, one point, as you talked about the confusion, nobody tells the frontline soldiers anything. They don't know there's a big, they don't know there's a giant battle going. All they know is what's directly in front of them, and they don't even know that. So when the Jim and the other soldier are stuck in a foxhole at that roadblock, they don't, they think the Germans might be coming. They're not sure. They don't know that the artillery that's been protecting them has had to pull back to prevent being overrun. So it's the chaos at the ground level. The chaos and the miscommunication is a huge factor that these soldiers have to deal with.
I started watching the Pacific.
Did you?
And that kind of reminds me of the same thing where you're talking about is right in front of you, the Japs. You don't know they're coming through the trees.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it hits the fan, and then one guy's running back to get some ammo. You don't know if you're coming back or not.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's just crazy.
Yeah, even that, like the hero of Guadalcanal, like where he just grabs the machine gun, but it's been firing for 30 minutes or something. So he just burns the skin
because
off his hand.
he lost his glove.
Yeah. You just have to do what you got to do. And there was one point where he was leaving, I think that roadblock, and then he was like, he looks back and goes, I hope so. I can't remember the soldier's name, but he goes, I hope so and so is all right. And as the reader, like, that guy's gone, but maybe I don't know. I haven't got there, but
Robert, I was going to ask. How did the Jeep Show entertainers react with the USO? Was there any competition, or was there any infighting, or was there, oh, I want to be with, you know what, I want to stay with the USO, or was it the USO like, hey, I want to join the Jeep Show? It sounds like they're getting a little more action.
Well, the USO was not, I want to join the Jeep Show, because they just couldn't. The USO was all civilians. So I don't know of any interaction. Now, Mickey Rooney, because he was such a big name, had his own radio show. He did radio shows on Armed Forces Radio as well, which the other guys didn't do. I mean, he did many things. He probably had dinner with, generals and things like that, because he was he was a huge star at that point. And he didn't say in his autobiography that he did any USO stuff, so I don't know, but I didn't pick up any sense of competition, because they were doing completely different jobs in different areas. Right. And I will say, one of the complaints by enlisted men about the USO shows, although they liked them a great deal, was that they never got to talk to the stars, to the performers afterwards, because the officers would hog the stars, and this is what we call chicken shit, in the World War II Army. So that I picked up that, but I didn't pick up any competition between the USO, totally different jobs, and USO was civilians and Jeep Show were enlisted men. So any USO performer could go home anytime they wanted. The enlisted entertainers were under orders, and if they said, okay, put down your microphone and pick up a bazooka.
Oh, gotcha.
They were under orders.
I gotcha.
So, different job totally.
So, this is obviously a great story. Is there any thought about putting it into another format, like a TV show or movie, something like that?
It's not. I am certainly going to look for an agent to represent me to production companies.
Yeah.
I haven't yet, because the book just came out and I've been busy with talking to people like you, which is really fun. Yeah. So I think so. World War II, as you know, is an evergreen topic.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that there will, that I will be able to option the rights, but I haven't done anything about that yet, and I'm not too worried about it for a few months. We'll hopefully the good reviews will continue. I get to talk to people like you, and think sales pile up, and I have a stronger case. But frankly, I'm completely ignorant about that whole process.
Well, Amazon, if you're listening, Netflix, get on it. Let's make a show.
Jeep Show.
Jeep Show.
Yeah.
Was so Jeep Show, particularly this one here, this book is WW2. Was it in the inception here, or was there anything in WW1 or anything thereafter, like any other conflicts that the Jeep shows were involved in other than WW2?
It wasn't in The reason I know it wasn't in World War I was Jeep shows were invented by a famous Broadway director named Joshua Logan. Joshua Logan directed South Pacific and Annie Get Your Gun, and these just huge Broadway hits of the 40s and 50s. He was, like many men, he enlisted. He was, I think, a captain in the Morale Corps. All these entertainers, 442s, that came over as part of this big show called Hip Hooray. And it had a orchestra of enlisted men, and they did, it was a big, huge performance variety show. And Mickey Rooney was the star. And they thought they were going to have this really nice duty where they were going to, they had done this show in the States. And they thought they were going to have this really sweet duty in Europe by doing this show in, London, and then in Paris. And then, after Amsterdam was liberated, in the big cities for large audiences. And when they got to Paris, they were told that the show was disbanded. They were never told why.
Oh.
And they were told that they would be divided up into squads to do Jeep shows at the front lines. And, it was probably, it was a little bit of a bubble being burst. So Jeep shows were invented by Captain Joshua Logan in 1944. And I do not know the Korean War is my next thing to study.
Okay.
For the sequel.
Yeah.
Don't
Yeah.
know how things will turn out, but I don't know if it continued after that. I do not know.
I was gonna say, when I was reading this book, my wife told me that her grandfather actually toured with the USO near the Korean War time. But he went to like Japan and Taiwan and Philippines and stuff like that. But
yeah,
obviously he wasn't enlisted at that,
right,
so
right.
But
Yeah.
I think this is just, as entertainers, those guys are right there where the metal meets the meat, and I think that's pretty cool. It's such a cool spotlight to shed on World War II. I don't think I've ever heard, I don't think anybody knows that except for people who do.
It's
no,
a general public.
Except if your father did it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. I have talked to historians that have spent their life studying, at an academic level, World War II. And I've talked to the biggest World War II buffs and nerds you can imagine. And none of them have ever heard of Jeep shows. Wow. But I have proof that they have.
Yeah. That's cool. Well,
yeah.
When I saw it was like it was based on Jim Hetzer and stuff, I was like, well, is the MOS 442 a real thing? So I started researching that, and I was like, oh, it is a real thing.
Yeah.
So, and I was trying to, I was putting together the Oxidol Circus and putting together the, the story I'd read. And I'm so happy I got to talk to you, because it was, you've really cleared up a lot for me.
I know some great stories.
Yeah.
Some great stories.
I'd like
and
to
that, I wanted it to be a really good story because, obviously my golden target audience for the book is World War II buffs and, people that like military history. But I also wanted to reach readers that aren't going to be reading nonfiction about World War II, because I wanted to teach them something that I had learned about what it was like to be an enlisted man in World War II. And the only way to do it is to tell them a story.
Right.
That's what, so I'm hoping that, I was able to take these really interesting stories and turn them into something that, fiction readers would like.
Yeah, it's a very good blend of history and storytelling. I like it. So
thank you.
It's really good.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's good. I'd like to see one about the Vietnam War. There's not much about the Vietnam War.
I know.
I don't even see where they could fit that in.
Yeah.
A Jeep show.
In World War II, everybody was all in supporting after Pearl Harbor.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody was all, Hollywood was all in supporting the war. And, the war, so many people had good jobs making war material, and children were gathering scrap metal drives, and, people were, had rations and changed how they cooked, and everybody was all in. Yeah. Korea was sort of like, nah, it's important to keep communism at bay. So, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then, what a disaster Vietnam was from a morale standpoint,
Definitely.
so there was kind of like World War II peak popular support. Korea, like, okay, it seems important.
Yeah.
Vietnam, oh my God, what are we doing?
Right.
Definitely. Yeah, and World War II, I've always said that it was like the last war that we got into because somebody attacked us.
Right.
Obviously the war on terror or whatever.
That's true.
But it was there's all these kind of things about the war on terror, but World War II was very clearly, hey, we got bombed. Okay, and we're going to put this down now.
Yeah.
And I think that
and we're fighting a dictator, and specifically German, in Hitler, that are murdering millions of people.
Yeah.
Just out of pure evil. We're fighting pure evil. And even though, in war there's plenty of misdeeds on both sides, when you're fighting somebody
enemy,
that is the definition of Satan,
absolutely.
it's there's going to be popular support.
Yeah, World War II was the last war that had a clear, precise enemy.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that everybody was all in.
The bad guy. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody was all in.
Yeah.
Well, Robert, I appreciate you coming on the show today. Tell all of our listeners where they can get this book and where they can find you on socials if people want to get in touch with you. Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. The book is on Amazon. Enter Jeep Show book into the search panel. It is also on bookshop.org for people that don't like Amazon. I do want to mention the project really made me have even more respect for my father's service and for veterans in general. So I'm donating $1 per copy to
Wow.
a veterans mental health organization called
Oh, wow.
Shields and Stripes.
Cool.
I would have given them all the profits from the book, but $1 a copy is way, way, way more.
Okay.
Until I sell the rights, if that ever happens.
Yeah,
So I do have a website where people can contact me.
Okay.
It's jeepshowbook.com. And I put a lot of trivia up there that I could not fit in the book.
Mhm.
And I also put in there's a character in the book, I think you've gotten that far, called the reporter, a war correspondent.
Mhm.
And in the last draft of the book, I had him write in 1946 a column for the New York Times that they never published. But I had him write like looking back on the war. And my editor made me take it out of the book, but I stuck it on the website.
Okay.
And I think it's really, really worth reading to see what someone looking back in 1946 or 47 with a broad perspective. And I just want to read you one paragraph from it. And sometimes my voice catches when I read this and I think about my dad. America fielded millions of citizen soldiers who disliked the goddamn army, were ambivalent about their officers, and resisted the trappings of military hierarchy, also known as chicken shit. Yet many of them will remember their service as the ennobling experience of their lives. If you ask them, they will tell you they fought not for their country or for lofty ideals, but for each other, for their buddies, to get the job done and get home.
Oh, that's
Okay.
beautiful, actually.
Dang, that's good.
Yeah, yeah. So that whole essay is on the website as well. So that's how to learn more about the book. And I would love to get any comments anyone has, through the website. And
Okay.
look, this has been a real privilege to be talking with you. And I've loved the questions you've asked.
It's been a privilege having
Yeah,
you
that's
on.
awesome. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thanks for coming on the show. We
Sure.
appreciate you. And we'll be in touch.
Yeah.
I'll call you about Korea in 3 years.
There you
All
go.
right, yeah, there you go.
Absolutely.
All right. Goodbye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Well, there you have it.
That was great, actually.
He's also got a really cool map of the storyline through there, the Fort Thomas to the Battle of the Bulge.
Oh,
back.
okay.
So, yeah, on his website, just got a lot of good information. So
Yeah, pick the book up, folks. Is it only in paperback or is it ebook?
I think it's
That
an
you know.
ebook too. I think
It is? Okay.
I think. Yeah.
Is there audiobook on it?
I don't know. Probably not
Yeah,
yet.
Joey's all about the audio book.
Hey, you read it and record it.
I'll record it.
There you go.
I'm gonna record it like my hillbilly.
Hillbilly Elegy?
Come on now.
Come on, man.
Oh, that would be great.
Dylan
Using
Twinkies.
that voice.
Yeah. Dylan Twinkies. I don't know.
You dang twig. Dang Mothman.
I gotta
stole
work
the
on it.
twinks.
Well, that was a good interview. I appreciate
Yeah, it was really
you guys
good.
hanging in there. I thought it was a good interview.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean,
It was really good interview.
It was on the heels of what we were just talking about WW2, so that's why I thought it was interesting.
Yeah. Hey,
Well, anybody got any final thoughts
yeah.
before we end the show?
I wonder if the morale, because they were there for morale.
Yeah.
I wonder if the people that had to boost morale needed their own morale to be boosted.
You mean the entertainers?
Yeah, because how awful would it be to go up every night to perform?
Oh my gosh.
And you're in there, you're like, oh, I gotta do this again, like a monkey. Ugh.
Yeah.
I think that's one of
and
the
you're
things.
surrounded by this crazy thing of war.
Yeah.
And then that's got to be weighing on you.
Yeah.
How can
Yeah.
you perform in that?
I was gonna ask him that, but then you had such good questions, Curtis.
yeah,
that
Curtis brought it hard.
I was
did,
gonna
bro.
stumble with my question. Duh, monkeys.
You should read
You had,
the
you had
Jayhawks.
such good questions. I was over here like, dang, Curtis.
Curtis is rocking it.
Wow.
I just read the book, man.
That's
That's,
it.
that's really all it took. Huh?
What's that?
I read the book and I actually
You're like,
retained it.
I know
So,
what
yeah.
happened in the book.
Well, and again, I was hoping he wasn't going to talk about the end of the book because I'm not there yet. So
It was really good.
I got
really
it.
Good
I got
interview.
it like Monday this week, and then I was like, I got to read this book. I got it. I was 4 or 5 hours every night.
Yeah, I gotta find out what
And
this
I'm a
is about.
slow reader, so
Yeah.
I did want to say,
Oh.
My
Oh,
hat.
yes, the hat. Hold on.
my
This
hat,
is a new hat. We didn't talk about that, but
This was not sent to me. Well, it was, but I had it created. And if you guys can tell me in the comments or on Discord, what am I replicating here?
Giver.
Yeah.
Okay.
Give her. Hardly even know her.
Yeah.
Well, it comes. I'll give you a hint. Comes from a movie.
Let me see it. Let me look
Okay.
at it. Get her done.
Don't shout it.
No?
Don't shout it out if you know it. But
Don't shout it out.
You guys don't know it, so
Dang.
it's a cult classic movie.
Um,
Don't say it. Don't say it.
Pulp Fiction.
Dang.
Is it
it's
really?
Not, no,
Got
it's
it.
not Pulp Fiction.
Chippendale.
All right.
Hey, I appreciate everybody listening to the show today. Thanks for checking out Robert's interview, and check out his book. It's on Amazon. Just go look it up, Jeep Show. If you didn't like this episode, I appreciate you listening this long. Hey, tune in next week. You might hear Joey say,
What?
That's every
Wasn't
time.
ready.
Every single time. What is going on?